So I'll start with I can't see the chat box, but I'd like you to just maybe close your eyes or look up and just think about one word that you think represents artificial intelligence well. And then when you figure out that one word, then type it in the chat box. Because if you start looking at the chat box, you'll see what other people are saying and then you will be influenced. But I'd just like you to think about it and then type it out. Yeah, I see innovation, machines, future, data, food, information, Westworld, simulation, labor, convenience, I guess. Okay, so we don't have much of a consensus. Everybody seems to have a different word. And I just want to apologize. I know my sound is not good. I was traveling and I left my headset somewhere else. So I hope you can sort of hear me. Am I okay?
Your sound is fine, Ivy.
All right, great. Okay. So would anybody want to just pop up and say what they were thinking? I liked innovation. I liked convenience. I liked everything. I liked food. Professor Miklos, why does AI remind you of food?
Because the past presentation was talking about AI applied to hot pots.
Okay, to
Made me hungry.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so somebody about labor. Labor was interesting. Has it anything to do with what we just had? Or whoever said labor, do you mind saying something? Or convenience? Or
Oh, sorry. I typed labor because I just thought of the presentation given minutes ago. With the application of AI, some people may lose their jobs, and the initial cost of AI could be high in the beginning. That's why I say labor.
Yeah, absolutely. And convenience or innovation or what else was it? Anybody else has something they want to chime? Just, I want to give an open floor.
I said convenience. I said that because of when pretty much I'm just thinking of like you can with AI you can simplify difficult tasks. So it's just like you can pretty much like microwave food. It's like convenient. You get it faster, get it quickly. But that was kind of my mindset when I said convenience and stuff. So that's where I was coming from.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Innovation. Or anybody else want to chime in?
I was in innovation. I was, as I say, as I have in this lecture, things from the past comes to mind. I don't know if anybody remember the series from the 80s, The Small Wonder. This guy builds a robot and it's Vicky, voice input command something. And the robot, the robot learns from her past mistakes and she learns the language and things like that. In the 80s, this was something like really futuristic. 30 years later, it's really close to happening, like with Siri and Cortana. We tell them things and we have things that we command with a voice. Like these were things in the past that were like, wow, if we could only have this and that. So this innovation seems cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. What seemed like a dream is now reality, with the power of mobile computing and everything. Westworld, who's thinking about Westworld when they hear artificial intelligence? Somebody wants to chime in there?
I was thinking of that just because that was a big, if anyone watches the show, that was a big topic about how everything was automated, including mapping out people's lives. In the show, and that technology was just central aspect to it. But generally, when I think of automation, I think about how businesses are now accomplishing more earnings with less labor than they were in like the 80s. And that seems to be the case now. And the population's only growing. And so, there's more people, less jobs. If that's what I think about.
Absolutely makes sense. Then anybody else data or adaptive?
I put data. I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all this type of intelligence stems from data, and I kind of view it as the backbone, and the more data that we have and come up with, the higher confidence level the outcome will be.
All right, so that was actually a good segue into my next slide, which pretty much I will be talking about the inner workings of artificial intelligence. So when you hear artificial intelligence, you just mentioned data, and that's great. I'd like you to actually think about two aspects, because majority of the AI that we currently have really use data. So they're highly data driven. And this data, as you can see in the first third of the slide, represents data. So what happens is the AI inputs or gets the input of a massive amount of data. And from that data, it's able to look for patterns, right? What is the patterns in the data, right? And once it finds those patterns helps it to form subsequent predictions over new data sets that it hasn't seen before. So data is really the heart and I'd say the main point of artificial intelligence. And based off the data, the AI is able to develop algorithms. So this second part is the what actually now is used. AI is actually algorithms that are able to form predictive or descriptive tasks. So you can see, for example, when we talk about those dangers or those negative consequences of AI, you can see on the top part of the screen is that AI, first, because it's data driven, it can be able to analyze large amounts of data. However, there is this fear that people have that, hey, will this AI be able to learn more than it ought to know about human beings? So there are risks. There are benefits of AI, but there are also risks of AI, and we'll talk about that in subsequent slides. But then what I will focus here now is the bottom third of the screen, which is the applications of AI. And so we have three levels of AI. The first level of AI, we call it assisted AI. So assisted intelligence just automates simple tasks. And then the second level of AI is called augmented AI. So this AI works with the human beings in performing decision-making tasks. So for example, if you are performing an audit, right? I hope you guys are familiar with auditing. If, for example, you have an artificial intelligence that is able to look through a bunch of transactions and is able to flag high-risk transactions for the auditor to perform testing, that type of AI is an augmented AI because the AI is able to share decision-making tasks with the human being. So that's augmented AI. However, if the AI is able to subsequently perform the testing of those tasks and be able to complete the audit without human intervention, then that will be the third level of AI at the bottom here, which is autonomous AI that can function all on its own. So there are these three levels of AI that we've sort of started to appreciate are different types of AI that pose different types of benefits and risks as well. So you know that once an AI, for example, like in that video we saw in the previous presentation, that the AI in those presentations were more autonomous AI. They could operate all on their own without human intervention. So many companies do want that type of AI because it'll result in high cost savings for them. However, again, we did talk about the fact that what will happen to the human beings who did those jobs, right? And so I'll talk about that aspect of things as we go along in this presentation. So I just wanted to mention, now that we have already talked about the one word that you thought about, for example, innovation or data of Professor Miklos' food, I'd like you to now sort of add these two words to your knowledge of AI, which is data and algorithms. Algorithms are the inner workings, right? So based off the data, the AI is able to build a model that can predict subsequently what will happen, right?
Hi, Ivy. I have a question. So,
Sure.
will like based on the capabilities of AI that you list here, would you consider RPA as assisted intelligence, or it's not? Like based on your
Okay, that's a great question. So I think before even considering these levels of AI, I think it's important to understand what, for example, automation is, such as robotic process automation, right? So RPA would be a process whereby you have manual steps. For example, every day, if you're an accounts payable person, every day you open your email, you download an invoice, and then you copy the numbers in the invoice into a financial system. So those are very manual steps, right? And those steps can be programmed in this very simple code, right? So those might not be what we call artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is a type of technology that tries to mimic the human cognitive skills, right? So if you can be able to automate a step like that, like the accounts payable step, and it doesn't need any intelligence, right? There's no decision point in that step, right? If there's no decision point, there's no fuzzy logic there. It's very straightforward. Open an email, copy the numbers in that email into a financial system, then that is not artificial intelligence. But when it becomes artificial intelligence is when, for example, that invoice is not machine readable. So, for example, it's a handwritten invoice or it's a scanned invoice, and the numbers there are not very clear. So you'd be like, is this a 7 or a 1? So there's some need for decision points there. And now if you use a technique like optical character reading, that technique now becomes artificial intelligence, because now you're trying to employ some intelligence to determine what numbers are and what letters are, what they're supposed to represent in that particular scenario.
Right.
Is that clear?
Yeah, it really depends on the like the task that you automate, right? So, for example, for the rule-based tasks that don't require judgment, basically, it's just like follow the rules. But if you want to automate some tasks that require some like level of judgment, like you need to do recognition of the numbers, right, from the PDF, then that's considered as the AI functionality.
Absolutely. Well said. All right. Anybody else have a question on that? I know it's really fuzzy, and there's so many different types of AI. There are some AI actually that don't need data, but that's a very small portion of AI. But the general AI that we have is trained most of the time using data. But so this is, again, as I say, it doesn't apply to everything, but it's important for you to appreciate the fact that AI is really a data-driven technique.
I do have a quick question, if you don't mind, on this portion.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. We're here to learn.
So it works with large data structures. If AI is making decisions with an output, can that output change the algorithm? So I don't know if I'm saying this properly, but
Yeah.
can that output change the algorithm to increase the confidence level on the decisions that it's being made, being
So
the data's growing?
Absolutely. So you can see in this circle, right? It's like a continuous cycle, right? So let's take this case, right? We have an artificial intelligence that's being used to approve bank loans, right? So if the AI is being used to approve bank loans and many people are sending in their applications, the AI begins to approve some and deny some, right? And then that approval and denial data is fed back into the same AI or another AI as a training data to determine which are good approval or denial points, right? So you can see like the judgment of one AI or the same AI actually goes into as a data source for the next decision point, right? So it means that whatever the AI decides now, if that data isn't vetted and it's left to continue on its own, it might go down a path that might not be correct, right? So if it made a decision error in the beginning, right, it was only approving certain type of people and denying certain type of people. If it continues like that, then without any intervention, you might see there being a perpetual trend that might not be right. And that's why a lot of companies have come to that realization, and they're beginning to talk about these ethical aspects of AI. So this is really the drive of our research. Does this answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
All right. So if no one else has a question, I think I'll move on. So basically, I won't spend a lot of time here, but there is this founding father of AI. We call him Alan Turing. And Alan Turing was trying to, and this is actually in the 50s, right? So let's just appreciate how smart this guy was in 1950, trying to define what artificial intelligence is. And up to now, there are scientists who are unable to define what AI is. And we still quote this man 60, 70 years later. And so this man, Alan Turing, and there's actually a movie about him here in this screen called The Imitation Game. If you love movies, you will definitely enjoy to watch this if you like AI as well. And so in this movie, in his book and in his writings, he defines what artificial intelligence is. And he says, if there is a human being here, right? Consider this being you. And between you, there is a curtain. And you can't see what's behind the curtain. And you are engaging with whatever is behind the curtain or behind the wall. And you still believe that whatever is behind the wall is a human being, yet it is actually a machine. then that machine exhibits artificial intelligence. So many times you've gone onto websites and you see a pop-up like a chat box, right? And it says, for example, if you're on Amazon or whatever website and you're trying to find something and then a pop-up comes up and says, hi, do you need any help? And you begin to type there and you're not sure whether the responses you're getting are from a real human being or from a machine, right? You can consider whatever you're engaging with to be artificial intelligence if it's a machine, if it's a chat bot, right? And not a human life support team. Right? So this is just the generic definition of what artificial intelligence is as per Alan Turing. So one thing I want to mention here before I just talk about some couple of AI examples here is that we don't have what we call, like, you know, when you watch the movies, what we call general artificial intelligence, meaning an artificial intelligence that's able to behave like a human being 100%. We don't have that. We have what is narrow AI. So narrow AI is an artificial intelligence that's good at one thing and can do it very well, sometimes even better than a human being, but cannot do all things, right? So for example, you may have in your house those robots that clean the floor, right? That move around and clean the floor. That AI is very good at cleaning the floor, perhaps even better than you do, but then it's not able to drive a car. It's not able to cook, right? So it exhibits skills in one particular area, but it's not able to replicate its skills into different areas or grow its knowledge into different areas as a human being is able to do, right? You're able to transfer the knowledge you've gained at school and apply it to maybe your social life. But the AI is not able to do that right now. So we have only narrow AI. We don't have AI that is general AI that's as good as a human being. I hope that's clear. So I just want to talk about a few examples before I jump in and talk about use of AI in accounting and auditing very quickly. So there are just a few uses that perhaps you've seen of AI. One which I found very interesting was an article that I read, and actually you can see a YouTube video around it, about how AI is being used to perform interviews. And so right now, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but in a previous class, there are some auditing students who mentioned that they had gone to an interview in one of the big four firms and they felt like they had to submit a video. And I guess that video was being analyzed using an AI. They weren't going through the physical interviews as normally you would. They were using recordings to perform interviews. So it was very interesting. And I thought, okay, this is just the beginning of rolling out this AI as a recruitment platform. And I don't know if you consider this to be proper or ethical, or if you're comfortable with it, the fact that your interview might be, first of all, analyzed by an artificial intelligence and not a human, right? So this is something worth debating and thinking about, and that's what people are talking about right now. Another interesting example I'd like to mention here is an AI that was being spotlighted by Bloomberg. And this AI is being developed by Amazon. And so what they're trying to do is develop a wearable device that's able to listen in on your conversation, and it's able to recommend things or your emotions that is conveyed in your voice. So for example, in this picture, you can see somebody's coughing, and then the wearable device is able to advise them, do you need a cough syrup? Do you need me to order for you some chicken soup or something like that? So again, I don't know how comfortable you will be with such an AI. Of course, it's beneficial that it's able to pick up on your mood and recommend things for you. But again, I don't know how comfortable you will be with the privacy and challenges as well. So if we had time, we would have debated this a little bit, but I'll just move along because of time. So the last AI, again, I'd want to just spotlight here is an interesting paper that was done by MIT. And what they did is that they went onto YouTube and got millions of YouTube videos. And then based off those videos, they were able to program an AI. And that AI, at the end of the day, didn't need to look at the faces of people. All it needed to do was listen to their voice. And once it listened to their voice, it could be able to reconstruct what they look like. So even for data points that it had never seen before, it was able to almost accurately predict what those people would look like, right? So this is, again, an example of an artificial intelligence that can perform better than a human being, because definitely I can't reconstruct or imagine what people look like based off their voices alone. But here is an AI that was developed that could do that. So this is just to show you some of the interesting capabilities of AI that surpass our human capabilities currently. So why would we need artificial intelligence in auditing? So the main thing that drives us as technology people or accounting business firms, what's driving them to research the use of artificial intelligence in auditing is the fact that human beings have an information processing and memory capacity limitation, right? So you as a human being, you can only process a limited amount of data. And even storage capabilities in your minds are so small that even a subset of that information that you've processed, that only that small subset can be stored on your mind. So again, you can see that there's clearly this information processing limitation that we have. But then we have faster machines that have increased memory capacity. They have increased storage capacity and processing capacity. So basically, based off all these different enhancements of technology, you can see that we have AI being very useful in assisting human beings be able to perform their work. So if, for example, auditors or accountants or anybody, bankers, if you need to review millions of data points, for example, if you're an audit firm and you're trying to audit your audit client, and they have a lot of internal data, and then there's also a lot of public data around them, for example, news articles or social media postings that you as an auditor need to also review, what will happen is you might end up having information overload. So the great thing is that people are beginning to recognize that they need AI, they need other data analytics tools to support them in this task. And so what has been advocated for is not just the pure automation, but then what people are beginning to recognize is the use of humans and machines, right? Combining both humans and machines in performing work is much better than a purely automation approach, especially for professions such as accountants or auditors that may require some judgment. So now that we have talked about just the general facts of AI, what I'd like to talk about here now is the different implementations of AI within the big four firms. So I know we have had a lot of discussions like in the previous video about how AI is being used. So there are numerous pillars. I'm just spotlighting here 6 different techniques. So there's like machine learning, smart analytics, natural language processing, machine vision, intelligent RPA, and Abby just talked about robotic process automation. When you add intelligence, as I mentioned, if you're able to add, for example, an optical character reader that's able to determine whether, as I said in that example, whether a number is 7 or 1, when you add that intelligence layer to robotic process automation, that becomes artificial intelligence. And also speech recognition is another AI technique as well. So all these different techniques, as you can see in this slide, firms such as KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, even EY are already using these different techniques within their audit processes. And in case you're interested, we can always share with you a big, we have already a running list of the different ways in which AI is being used by the big four firms. And I can easily share with you a couple of links around this after the class. But what the main takeaway from this slide is that all these techniques are being used right now, either in pilot form or in full scale by the big four firms. So it's important for you to be cognizant, if you're interested in going to work in those firms, to learn that this at least one or more of these techniques, in order for you to be able to converse, especially during interviews, or even if you're in your work right now, for you to be able to add value to the firm that you belong to. So I want to also mention here that we talked about the fact that, is it only the big four firms or is it only the big firms that are going to leverage AI? The good news is that there are also small and medium-sized firms that are beginning to also implement artificial intelligence. And how they're doing it is by using what they call software as a service. So basically what they do is they pay licenses. They don't have to buy like the hardware or the software or invest a lot of money. They're able to just pay for licenses, and they're able to access cloud-based, so basically internet-based artificial intelligence software, which can enable them perform business tasks. So for example, for auditing, there is this online AI software called Caseware, and there's also MindBridge. And this software is able to perform different audit tasks for small and medium-sized audit firms. So again, if you're interested, we can always share with you links about demos or information about this software. So it's interesting for you to just be able to learn at least one of these, because some of them do have trial versions for students. So if you're able to at least learn one of these new AI softwares, which you can be able to, demonstrate or say, during interviews, that would be an added advantage for you as well. So, yes.
Ivy, one thing. I'm going to ask Hanchin to make a presentation of Caseware AI, because we got access to it, and so why not?
Yep, for sure. So yeah, in case you get
And maybe
access
you
to,
can make a presentation of MindBridge if you have access to it.
for sure, yeah, we even have videos. We have, I think, a video or something that we can easily share.
Yeah, just
Yeah, I
give
can
them a
have.
link. That's
Yeah,
good.
I can. Yeah, we can give you, if you're interested immediately, we can just share with you some things, especially like as I mentioned, the links to the different big four firms use cases. I think that would be very interesting, especially just watching some of the videos, just feeling inspired, about what's going on and not feeling threatened because
Yeah, that
I
would be
feel,
great. That would be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I feel like if you don't know, you feel that AI is this big beast, but once you become a little bit more familiar, then you realize it's just a technology and you're able to, not be dominated by it. So this is just as I mentioned again, you can see that there are different layers of artificial intelligence. There's assisted AI like chatbots. Then there's augmented AI, basically like as I mentioned before, if you're able to use AI to do part of the tasks and the human does part of the tasks, that's augmented AI. But then the autonomous AI is the one that can do everything all on its own. So those were the three levels I talked about in the beginning of the slide. And again, here I say that as AI shifts towards autonomous, then the risks and the benefits as well increase. So this is where a lot of the research is in trying to just understand how autonomous AI is going to change our world. So lastly, before I jump into towards the end of my presentation, I just want to talk about how big four firms are talking about how they're going to use artificial intelligence to change the way they operate. So one of the big four firms called Deloitte say that the first step they're going to follow is to standardize or simplify their processes. So for example, if you think about Deloitte, imagine maybe they have, I don't know, 20,000 clients, 30,000 clients. So for each of those audit clients, what they plan to do is standardize or simplify their processes so that they're similar across the board. And then the next thing is that they want to make sure that the data they receive is digital, right? So that it's got less, it's machine readable and therefore it can be analyzed by machines easily. Then the next step, they want to employ automation. And Abby has talked about RPA and she's really doing a lot. So basically RPA is able to automate a lot of the manual processes. And then after that, they're able to add a layer of intelligence. So this, like what I mentioned in the previous slides, machine vision, speech recognition, optical character reading, all those different techniques now will be added on top. And this is now basically these two steps, they have pretty much, I can say, almost done. But automation to intelligence is where they're playing around right now. And they really want to employ these techniques within their practice. So I want to stop here and just pose one quick one-word exercise again. Let's do the same thing. Close your eyes, look up, and just think about one word, either increase or decrease, okay? So the question is, do you think artificial intelligence will result in finance or accounting or whatever career you are in that career, do you think artificial intelligence will result in job losses or job growth? So I see most of you are saying decrease, right? And actually, my next slide, I want to address that. So there's a good article, and I should have put it here, but I will share with you if you're interested, that was done by the CPA Journal in Australia. And what they say is that artificial intelligence is going to result in certain jobs disappearing, not jobs, but tasks. And what will happen is that there are going to be new roles and new tasks going to be defined, right? So it's not going to be really a decrease, right? Like you won't see suddenly there'll be everybody having, like everybody in accounting and finance going home. But what will happen is that there's going to be a shift in the roles that are being performed. So what will happen is mostly the mechanical jobs or the mechanical tasks are going to be replaced by definitely not even artificial intelligence, but by some form of automation. And then what will happen is that the analytical roles, which are the next level of intelligence, some of them will be replaced by artificial intelligence, and some of those roles or tasks will still need to be performed by a human being, depending on the level of judgment. But then on this third and fourth level, where there's need for intuition or empathy, right? These are characteristics that artificial intelligence is yet to exhibit. And therefore, anything that requires in some level of intuition or empathy, those type of jobs, for example, there was a report that showed that jobs such as being a tourism, like if you're taking people for tours, right? Those type of jobs might never go because people always want a human being to be the one taking them out for tours and explaining things. So those jobs need some intuition, some empathy, some social skills. Those roles will remain. And even some of our roles are going to change, even if we're accountants, they need to change now to include different new tasks. And that report, which I mentioned, I can easily share with you, defines what those new tasks are. So what will be needed from students right now who are training in accounting and auditing? What will be needed for you once you go into the job market is for you to have some curiosity, always wanting to learn, be creative, right? Always looking for different perspectives to things. You'll also need to be very skeptical, right? And being analytical and being logical, right? Being able to reach conclusions based off well-founded data. So these are just some of the things that the critical thinking that you should exhibit will be really paramount, will be really key. You will not just get a job because you can do things manually. That will change. You will get jobs because you exhibit intuitive skills, analytical skills, and you have some emotional intelligence as well. So this will be really important for you to think about as you consider repositioning yourself for this new world when we have artificial intelligence being either augmented or autonomous in our workforce. So lastly, I won't spend a lot of time because I know I'm up. I've just got 3 minutes, but we've already started talking about the ethics of AI, right? And some of the research that we've been working on with Professor Mikkels and also Professor Helen, who's also in our department, is thinking about, for example, the privacy and security issues around the use of artificial intelligence. For example, will the data that is being used by AI, is it authorized? Is it right for that data to be used by artificial intelligence? And sometimes this data might outlive even the human being who generated it, right? So how will you be sure that the data that was collected will be used for the purpose that it was intended? So there's so many different ethical issues. For example, also we talked about how will there be equity, right? Once AI is used, will companies and shareholders grow in wealth and then the employees lose their jobs? How will that be balanced? And in Europe, they're actually talking about, for example, tax laws, whereby if you use artificial intelligence as a company, you might actually face some tax, right? So you might save on payroll, but you actually have to pay tax. And then that tax that will be collected can be shared with society, right? So those are some of the new ideas, this new thinking around how we can balance this out. So we're not saying we don't need AI, we just need to be smart and think about how we can mitigate some of the challenges that arise with the use of artificial intelligence. And this is what we are trying to research and trying to push for in this particular, I see robot tax. Absolutely, yes, robot tax.